Welcome, traveler. Here at Forgotten Kingdoms of Africa, we ask questions history was too afraid to answer. The kind that begin with what if and end somewhere between legend and destiny. Tonight's journey takes us back, not to pharaohs nor to Rome, but to the deep red earth of West Africa. To the place where iron first sang, where bronze breathed life, and where fire itself was considered divine. Because tonight, we're lighting that fire again. So, what if ancient Nigeria discovered gunpowder first? What if the spark of thunder belonged not to the East, but to Africa? Grab your calabash of palm wine, friend. You'll need it for this one. Long before the crowns of Benin gleamed, before the walls of Kano touched the sky, there was Nok, a civilization of iron and terracotta, farmers and sculptors, artists who carved human faces into eternity, and among them, a boy named Eromone. He wasn't supposed to be important, just a blacksmith's son. But destiny has a bad habit of finding the people who least want it. Eromone had a strange gift. Curiosity. The kind that makes elders sigh and neighbors hide their goats. He wanted to know why fire danced, why smoke curved, and why the air around the forge sometimes trembled. While others forged blades, Eromone mixed things. Charcoal, iron dust, sulfur scraped from a yellow rock, and something else, something black and powdery he found along the riverbank after a lightning storm. He called it Omi Inu Ina, the water inside fire. One night, while the village slept, he added too much of it into the furnace. He leaned in, just as it roared back. Boom! Half the forge vanished. So did his eyebrows. The forest echoed for miles. The next morning, elders gathered around the crater. "What god have you offended this time, boy?" Eromone, still smoking slightly, smiled. "No god, Baba. I think I just made thunder." Weeks passed, then moons, then seasons. Eromone kept testing, carefully this time. He found that the powder, when packed tight, burst harder. When left loose, it burned like wind. He realized something divine. Power could be contained. Not begged from the gods, not summoned by priests, contained and released. He didn't know it yet, but the first spark of gunpowder had just been born in Africa. Of course, the elders banned him from experimenting again. So naturally, he built a smaller forge behind his mother's hut. Because that's how every scientific revolution begins, with disobedience and bad decisions. As decades turned into generations, Eromone's secret became legend. The story of the boy who trapped thunder. His descendants carried whispers of his discovery in songs and carvings. The world forgot him, but the earth did not. Because when the fires of Nok went silent, the spark waited, sleeping beneath the soil, waiting for someone else to wake it up. Centuries later, that spark would rise again, this time in the sacred city of Ife, where the gods were sculpted in metal and beauty itself had a language. But we'll get to that in a moment, because history, like palm wine, is best enjoyed slowly. 500 years after Eromone's explosion shook the forests of Nok, the world had changed. Kingdoms rose like termite mounds, tall, ambitious, beautiful, and fell just as quickly. The Yoruba had carved their power across the lands, from the golden rooftops of Ife to the bustling trade roads of Oyo. The Benin Empire, further south, was sculpting bronze into memory and carving its kings into eternity. And far to the north, the Bornu and Hausa city-states watched the desert, trading salt for gold and secrets. It was a world of traders, poets, blacksmiths, and kings who dreamed of thunder. In the heart of Ife, a new artisan worked the forge. Her name was Adesua, daughter of a bronze caster. Like Ahriman, she had the curse of curiosity. One day, while refining charcoal for casting, she noticed something strange. A powder that fizzled and sparked when it touched oil. She tried to contain it in a clay pot. It hissed, then burst. She screamed. The pot exploded. Her workshop wall now had a new window. And thus, history repeated itself, with slightly better ventilation. The next morning, her father inspected the damage. He sighed, then smiled. "You've made thunder, my daughter. Now make it useful." And so she did. Adesua refined the formula using charcoal, ground sulfur from Ife's markets, and saltpeter from the northern merchants who traded along the Niger. By accident, or perhaps fate, she rediscovered gunpowder. But unlike Ahriman, she had the full support of a kingdom that loved innovation. The Oni of Ife, wise and curious, funded her experiments. Soon the palace was filled with clay tubes that belched smoke and fire. Drums were replaced with explosions, and priests began debating whether Shango himself had blessed this discovery. The first Ina Ologun, Fire of War, was born. A cannon forged in bronze, sculpted with divine faces, and loaded with powder that could shatter walls. When they tested it outside the city, the explosion echoed for miles, the sky shook, and a new age began. Rumors spread faster than trade caravans. To the north, the Hausa city of Kano heard whispers of thunder weapons. To the south, the Oba demanded to see one for himself. Within a generation, the knowledge of gunpowder spread across the Niger Basin, carried by traders, scholars, and spies. And just like that, the continent began to change. In Benin, the Oba ordered his smiths, the Igun Eronmun, to forge thunder in bronze. The same hands that sculpted gods now built cannons. Their designs were works of art, decorated barrels carved with royal motifs, faces of ancestors, and the serpent of Olokun coiling along their sides. Every shot fired wasn't just a weapon, it was a prayer. The Benin Empire, already a force of art and order, now wielded the divine power of fire. Walls that once protected kingdoms now bowed before them. To the north, the Bornu Empire didn't sit quietly. They had traded with scholars of the Sahara, and they understood the chemistry behind the fire dust. Soon, their desert forges glowed bright as dawn. Bornu musketeers, armed with iron-barreled rifles and camel-mounted cannons, began patrolling the dunes. The Sahara, once a silent sea of sand, now roared like a living thing. Caravans turned into armored convoys, trade routes became battlefields, and Africa entered its own gunpowder age, centuries before Europe would dream of it. The Gunpowder Wars began. At first, small skirmishes, then full-scale conflicts between rival city-states. Oyo versus Benin, Hausa versus Bornu. Old alliances burned. The smoke of thunder mixed with the scent of palm oil and blood. But amid the chaos, a strange thing happened. Unity began to whisper. It was during the height of these wars that 6 emissaries from Oyo, Ife, Benin, Nupe, Bornu, and Igbo lands met at a neutral island on the Niger. They came not as enemies, but as survivors. The rivers ran red. The cities were weary. Even the gods had grown silent. And there, under a moonlit sky, they forged something greater than war. They called it the Covenant of Fire. The agreement was simple. Gunpowder would no longer be used for conquest, but for defense, trade, and exploration. Knowledge would be shared, not hoarded. And together they would build something the world had never seen, a confederation of equals. That night, the desert winds carried a new name across the land, the Thunder Federation. And from that day, Africa would never be the same. So, what started as one boy's bad chemistry experiment had now rewritten the destiny of an entire continent. But this is only half the story, because the Thunder Federation wasn't done changing history. Not yet. Next came the golden age of unity, invention, and impossible dreams, when kings became scientists, traders became astronomers, and Africa reached for the stars. Peace, real peace, is the hardest metal to forge. The Covenant of Fire did not end conflict overnight. It began something far stranger, a transformation. Because when warriors lay down their spears, the hammers of the smiths grow louder. And for the first time in centuries, the forges of Ife, Benin, and Bornu burned not for war, but for creation. In the city of Oyo, young apprentices began tinkering with the thunder powder, not to destroy, but to lift. They built tubes that spat flame high into the air. Priests of Shando called them sky torches. When fired during festivals, they painted the heavens with light. Children cheered. Elders pretended not to enjoy it. It was perhaps the world's first fireworks show. The Thunder Federation soon realized something profound, that gunpowder was only one face of a greater mystery. The true power lay in science itself, in curiosity, experimentation, and the courage to ask, why? And so began the Age of Learning. In Ife, the Ooni established the House of Iron and Stars, a place where blacksmiths and philosophers worked side by side. In Benin, the Oba funded workshops that combined art and machinery. Bronze casters created moving statues, water pumps, and even early mechanical drums. And in Bornu, desert scholars studied the stars with glass lenses traded from the north. They charted the constellations and noticed patterns that matched the rhythms of rainfall. It was astronomy, agriculture, and faith woven together. The Yoruba said the world rested on the back of a tortoise. The Bornu astronomers politely disagreed. They met halfway and decided it probably rested on both. Diplomacy, the true miracle of science. The Federation grew. Each kingdom contributed what it knew best. From Benin came art and architecture, towering walls now reinforced with iron lattices and gunpowder channels that could repel sieges without destroying beauty. From Oyo came strategy and innovation. The cavalry now carried smoke rifles that fired controlled bursts of flame. From Bornu came trade and desert mapping, caravans guided by the stars and compass rings forged from bronze. From Igbo lands, the engineers of Nsukka built intricate pulley systems and machines that lifted entire trees to construct vast wooden towers. From Nupe, mathematicians created early accounting tablets marking quantities in base 20 notations that predated European calculus by centuries. Africa was not only thriving, it was leading. By 1600, the Thunder Federation had built something the world had never seen. A continental alliance driven by innovation, guided by ethics, and united by the memory of war. The people called it Ojo Atokenwa, the chosen dawn. Once you've conquered the land, the sea, and the desert, the only direction left is up. In Ife, inventors began constructing massive bamboo towers with bronze mirrors at their peaks. They focused sunlight so sharply that it melted sand into glass. From this, they built the first telescopes in Africa, long tubes wrapped in carved leather fitted with desert glass lenses. One night, an astronomer named Adegoke of Ife peered through one and saw something incredible. Tiny lights, moving across the sky in predictable rhythm. He told the Ooni, "Those are not spirits, they are worlds." The Ooni thought for a moment, then whispered, "Then we are not the only artists in creation." Knowledge became worship, science became devotion, and the Federation, once defined by war, began sending scholars across the continent to Timbuktu, Nubia, Axum, sharing discoveries and translating ancient scrolls. While Europe still wrestled with its dark ages, the heart of Africa pulsed with light. Of course, not everyone liked it. Some priests still grumbled. "Why build towers to touch the sky? That's for the gods." To which the engineers replied, "Yes, but someone has to install the lightning rods." The next 2 centuries became known as the Golden Peace. Trade flourished. Cities grew luminous. Benin's moat sparkled at night with floating lanterns powered by chemical flame. Kano's markets were covered with bronze domes that amplified sound, letting a seller's call carry across miles. In Ife, water wheels and powder-driven pistons powered entire neighborhoods. Visitors from across the continent called it Eranwen Nare, the world that lives. Scholars debated which invention changed life the most, the iron pump that carried water to rooftops, or the powder-spark kettle that could boil tea in seconds. Both, frankly, saved marriages. But as the centuries turned, something new stirred beyond Africa's shores. Foreign sails appeared, pale ghosts on the horizon, curious traders from cold lands. Yet when they arrived, they did not find tribes or confusion. They found cities of bronze and glass, railways of powder propulsion, and libraries taller than cathedrals. European explorers recorded their shock. One wrote in disbelief, "Here in Ife, the people wield fire like pen and ink. They have forged not just weapons, but wonder." Africa was no longer a mystery. It was the world's teacher. And somewhere in the old lands of Nok, beneath red earth long cooled, lay the tomb of Eromon, the boy who first made thunder. His grave was marked with a single inscription, "The fire that learns." No gold, no crown, just those words. And somehow, that was enough. The fire had come full circle, from a boy's accident to a continent's enlightenment. And though centuries passed, the people of the Thunder Federation never forgot the lesson Ahriman taught them, that every explosion begins as a question.